the magnificent things that God did for me was He delivered me from abandonment issues. Again, in the car by myself, no one else there. And he's so strategic in terms of he brought back to my memory something I had read when I was about eight maybe. I couldn't have been over 10 years old. It was at a doctor's appointment. It was, I remember the blue book with the images on the front of it. It was Bible stories. And there was a story of Solomon and how and the two women that came to him, and one of the women's baby had died in the middle of the night, and she took the other lady's baby and was claiming that it was hers. So now they're there with him, trying to figure out, whose baby is whose, and they're pleading with him. And he takes the baby and takes out his sword and says that, well, I'll just split the baby in half. And one mother is okay with it, and the real mother was willing to give the baby away. And so again, I'm driving down the road, no radio playing. All of a sudden, this thought comes back to my mind. I remember it. And then I hear God whisper to me that you're that baby. And I was just like, wait, what? What? And so then I go to my Bible app as I'm driving. I Google the story. I try and pull it up. And God kept saying, you're that baby. And it hit me almost like, it's so interesting because it was heavy and then it was really light. Like it hit me that, oh my God, you've been upset and mad all these years because your mom gave you up when she didn't want to see you torn in two. How do you feel abandoned when when that's the reason why? Like I was just, and so that story, and again, I read the story when I was 8 to 10 years old. And never quite forgot it, but it never registered with me until I was on that long drive, and God just kind of spoke to me and told me that I was the baby in that story. And then I'm like, I remember that baby about to be split in half. And so he's so strategic and magnificent in that way that he planted a seed in me when I was younger and then allowed it to flourish when I really needed it to. And I began to see her differently because then I began to see her as that mother that didn't want to see her child cut in half. And so I could never go back to those feelings of abandonment and hurt anymore. It's like it left me in that moment. Fast forward a year later, my mom was pumping gas at a gas station, my biological mother, pumping gas at a gas station, and was shot in her legs. And I became her caregiver for several months. She moved into my home. I cooked meals for her every day, took her to all her appointments, all that stuff to help her get back on her feet. I don't think I would have been able to do that had God not delivered me the year prior. So it's like he's so strategic in that way that he planted a seed when I was 8 to 10 years old. He made it come back to my memory in a season that I needed it the most. And then he allowed me to care for my mother in an honorable way because now I didn't view her as the woman who had abandoned me. She was the mother who wouldn't allow me to be cut in half.
Wow, that is so amazing. Thank you so much, first and foremost, for sharing that story. And I just think it's so amazing how intentional God is. Like he will bring something from 5 years old back when you're 30, 40, 50, and it will change your life. Yes. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No, thank you for the opportunity to share that. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but I mean, again, he's amazing in that way.
So you had your daughter when you were 19, right? When you were in college. So what grade were you in when you found out you were pregnant with your daughter?
So I was in that, I was going into my sophomore year of college. Mm-hmm. So I had been up there for about a year, and then I found out I was pregnant. It was my second year there.
When you found out you were pregnant, you were a sophomore. Uh-huh. What was the first thought that came across your mind when you found out that you were pregnant with your daughter?
A little bit of shame, to be honest with you. I was the first, and disappointment. I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school without a child, and I was the first person to attend college. And I was on a full scholarship. So the thought of being pregnant made me feel like, well, what'd you do all that for to only end up the way everybody else was?
Yeah.
And so those were my initial thoughts. And in my book, Raising Justice, like the first chapter, I talk about, it begins with me outside of what I thought was an abortion clinic, because I did not want to face the shame of disappointing my whole family. Like I felt like I knew that I was a generational curse breaker, but it really didn't feel like that anymore. Once I found out I was pregnant and unmarried. So yeah, my initial thoughts were shame and how do I get myself out of this?
Yeah, there might be a young woman watching this or listening to this podcast who's experiencing the very same thing. They're in college, maybe they're a couple years in, or maybe they're a freshman and they found out that they're pregnant. And they might be experiencing the same thing. They might be confused, they might be afraid, they might feel shame or guilt. What would you say to that young lady who's listening?
For me, this is where faith comes in. Don't believe what you see right now. You're in a moment and there's so much more ahead of that. I am grateful for God's intervention with me when I got caught up in that moment, because it's hard. It becomes murky, it becomes cloudy, and it's hard to see past your current circumstances. Nothing lasts forever. Just as sure as day will become night, night will become day, your circumstances or where you are currently will not determine the rest of your life. And I think when you're in that moment, it's hard to see past those few hours or what's in front of you. And the minute you can get yourself out of what's in front of you in that moment, the faster you can start moving forward, start putting together a good game plan. But yeah, don't get stuck in that moment. It literally is just a moment. If you had told me when I found out the life that I would have, the life that I would be able to provide, the career that I would have, the things that I would be able to experience with my child, in that moment, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. I just couldn't. I was like, how am I
sometimes it's hard to see past the struggle or the present circumstance. Like it's hard, but that's important. That is important to see past
it's when
it.
faith really kicks in, because it's about, I say faith and I say hope, because having that grit of hope allows you to not stay so focused on what you see. You think about opportunity, you think about possibilities, you don't allow yourself to be consumed with what you're currently seeing.
Right.
And so faith really becomes important. Hope definitely becomes important when you find yourself in that situation.